20,000 students potentially with dyslexia, and that's just in this state. Many of those cases have gone undiagnosed, but a new law is aimed at changing that situation. Welcome to Beyond the Headlines. I'm Cheryl Jennings. Joining us now is somebody who has dyslexia and has become extremely successful, the Lieutenant Governor of California, Gavin Newsom.
Thanks for having me. It's fun.
Thank you for being so open about this.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. The response has been interesting. I've always been pretty honest about the fact I have dyslexia, but no one really paid much attention to it until I became mayor. And actually, one of the first things I did as mayor, the first public events, was visiting kids with dyslexia in a school, and everyone was shocked to know that I had this learning disability, which, if I look back, was probably the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Except a lot of kids would hear that and go, for me, it's the worst thing, right?
It was, and it was terrible growing up.
Well,
and
take me back.
I think for me, I think it was two things. One, it was very difficult for me in terms of my own academic experience. School was a terrible and terrorizing experience. I'll just be candid with you. Spelling, reading, writing. I had speech therapy. I went through, and I just, interestingly, in preparation to come here, I had not realized I went to 5 schools in 7 years. So I bounced around because, frankly, the schools back then didn't really focus on it. And they didn't want to focus on it even after they discovered that they should be focusing on it. So my mother, to her credit, kept bringing me to new environments. But I wanted to make the point, it wasn't just about me, it was about my mother. She was a single mom with another daughter, my sister, and she didn't have dyslexia, but the impact it had on her is remarkably pronounced. And I think that's just another part of this story. We talk about the impact of the kids and our own struggles, but the impact in the household is very, very challenging.
Well, it's tough because she's fighting for you. She wants you to succeed. Yeah. You're coming home with bad grades and low self-esteem. And I'm sure that just like every other kid, you didn't want anybody to call on you to read out loud. No,
are you kidding? You sit in the back of the class. I mean, back of the class with eyes down. Back of the class, acting like you're doing something else so no one would ever look up at you. Nothing more terrorizing, seriously, than going down the rows of desks. Everyone's asked to read a chapter in a book, and you're just staring at the clock going, please, 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 get this period to end so I don't have to stand up in front of everyone. And I'll never forget, God is my witness, Mr. Morris class, I'll never forget that moment where the clock didn't strike at the 50 minutes of the hour so I can get to the next period, and I had to stand up and people start laughing. And it's one of those experiences, I know it's almost cliche, right? But it's so indelible in my life because it was sort of I was exposed to the rest of the classroom.
What did they say? Did they mistreat
just laugh
you?
at me? I literally couldn't read. I'm shaking and I'm trying to read and I can't. And they're laughing and I put the stuff down. And if I could run out of class, I would, but I remember I didn't. And it was just one of those horrible experiences. And, you feel dumb, you feel isolated. People call you dumb. And frankly, a lot of the caregivers, to the extent that teachers themselves or the advisors, they didn't really know how to handle it. And you count on those that identify it and care enough, and that turned out to be my mother. And interesting for me, Cheryl, I found out about it. My mother hid it from me for years. I was diagnosed as dyslexic, but she didn't want to stigmatize me, and I appreciate that in hindsight. I lost her 15 years ago, so I don't have the benefit of talking to her about it today, but she didn't want to. And I remember coming home, and I found out I had dyslexia. I just thought I was, frankly, not that smart, and was struggling, and thought, something was wrong with me. And I came home early one day, and I went into her desk, and I found this file with my name on it, and these files of people observing me, because I'd been going to these classes once or twice a week after school. I just thought everybody did that. I didn't know any better. And it talked about this word dyslexia, and I remember confronting her about it. And she had a difficult time because she wasn't convinced it was the best thing to do to stigmatize me with it by saying, using it as a crutch.
Before we run out of time, I've got to ask you, how does this affect you now? Do you read speeches?
Yeah, I rarely read speeches, and if I do, they're the worst things I ever do because they're terrible. Teleprompter is easier than looking down at a piece of paper and looking up because I'll lose my place. When I read, I underline. If I read the newspaper, I underline. When I read books, don't ever lend me a book because I will underline it. And what I do, and this is the gift, I think, of dyslexia at the end of the day, and I know word gift is a controversial one because it's really ways of overcompensating understanding become gifts. They become attributes. They become advantages. But what I'm able to do is after I read something, I have to read it again. And in reading it again, then it becomes indelible in my mind. I'm able to take it away from the written word, and I'm able to connect it in a way where my memory is strengthened and my ability to communicate that message is strengthened. So there's so many wonderful things that come from it. Being creative, learning how to fail, because that becomes an expertise of those that are struggling with learning disabilities,
right.
And understanding the importance of failure in terms of ultimate outcome and success in life. So there's so many wonderful things that come from it, but we have to have people that are supportive, people that care. And now finally in California, because of extraordinary leadership, Decoding Dyslexia and other leaders, we have a bill that allows us to have a protocol in California finally to have our teachers and others take a look and begin to assess this 100,000+ students in California that may suffer from the same struggles.
It's really incredible how many kids are affected and go undiagnosed. So that's why we're doing this program.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. And it's, you know, and the diagnosis is by no means a death sentence. It's an opportunity now to think anew and act anew and to allow people to train those individuals a little bit differently and accommodate. Not in a negative sense accommodate, but give people maybe a little bit of extra time, a little bit more support. I remember for me it was speech therapy. I remember going learning literally how to enunciate, and then, you know, spelling, thank God for spell check now. We're living in an era with, you know, it's a lot easier than it used to be. So I'm still not well trained in that respect. But it's, you know, there's a creativity with a lot of dyslexic people that makes them some of the most, I think, dynamic and magnificent people, because they see things a little differently and they connect dots a little differently. And we live in a world where we don't want linearity, we don't want rote, we want people to think outside the box. We want people to connect things in different ways. And that's why some of my biggest business heroes, why I went into business, I think all the businesses I'm involved in, all of them, I mean, that's a dyslexic's business. They're very design oriented. There's an entrepreneurial energy. There's a risk orientation to all of it. My politics, I think, is followed accordingly. If you look at my politics, a little different than a lot of other elected officials. I'm willing to take some risks. I'm willing to say what I think, and all comes from those early experiences. And you look at Winston Churchill, you look at Picasso, you look at Richard Branson, all these fellow dyslexics, we're in good standing and we're in a good place.
You're in good company. Final question. You're a dad, 4 kids in your life.
Yeah.
You're worried about this?
I'm not worried about it, but I'm focused on it.
Okay.
And you know, my wife, who wasn't dyslexic and she has 4 brothers, 3 or 4 sisters. None of them were. They all exceptionally gifted, all fancy education, Stanford, Princeton. I'm not making this up. You know, all, you know, overeducated. And she's worried. And I'm like, it's not to be worried about. In fact, if our kids are, I just turned 6 and 4, 2 and a brand new baby. If they're dyslexic, fabulous. And that just allows us to have the opportunity to see them grow a little differently. And I'm for different. I'm for people being a little bit, you know, I'm for authenticity. I'm for personality. I don't want to be like everybody else, and I hope they're not like everybody else.
You are a message of hope, Gavin. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. All right.